Okay. Okay, guys, I think we've got loads of people already. We're coming up on 70. I think we can get going. Right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm sure I recognize most of these names, so you're all used to the forum and the layout. My name is Catherine O'Farrell. I am lucky enough to be able to host this forum every week with the wonderful Susie Hachet. I'm a group head with Bloom. I've just onboarded with Bloom this week, so I've switched from Athena, where we're 2 great years. Susie is the counselling lead for GEMS, and today we are joined by Jeff Evans, who is a school improvement specialist, and he's very kindly offered his support in looking at how we can best prepare for inspections. From what we know, inspections will be underway. SPIA have said they don't have confirmation, but in Dubai, as far as we know, they will be. Not sure whether that will be a distance learning evaluation or in person. ADEC, again, they're not sure whether it will be distance learning or an in-person evaluation. But we do need to be prepared. And the earlier that we can be prepared as SENCOs and inclusion leaders, counsellors and wellbeing support, the better, always the better. We are going to get going, and we're starting off with Jeff, who is going to lead through on some insights into his broad experience across schools on inspection preparation. Susie is going to monitor the chat. If you have any questions at any time, please do enter them on the chat, and we will come to them toward the end of the session. We'll have a short Q&A session. So the overall layout of today's session is going to be how to carry out a simple but hopefully informative inclusion audit, school inspection readiness with Jeff, SEF requirements, and I will give a look at how to compile a strategic inclusive education plan that hopefully will act as maybe an example or a sample. I get a lot of people asking for samples. And if anyone has any ideas that you think would be useful for us all to share, please do. None of us claim to be experts or to be the only ones who are doing this kind of stuff. Everybody is in it together. And the power of this kind of forum is getting everybody's ideas and sharing practice. So please do contribute where you can, and feel free to interrupt us. We don't mind. If you've got something to say, put your hand up or call out, and we can hear your ideas. So over to you, Jeff. Is Jeff
thanks,
here?
Catherine.
Yeah,
thanks.
You've got you. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
I'm going to make you a co-host, Jeff.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, could you just make the, put the slideshow, what do you call it, maximize it or whatever?
I can. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. So good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation today to join the workshop or the forum today. I'm speaking to you from Al Ain. I've worked with schools mostly in Abu Dhabi and Al Ain, but obviously some as well in Dubai and Ajman and Sharjah. So what I'm going to try to do this afternoon is just to speak a little bit about the inspection preparation. Obviously, I just checked that it's clear. Can you hear me clearly? Is it fine?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Catherine was talking then just a moment ago about the different regulators. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of difference with SPIA, KHDA, ADEC. They are, at the moment, they're using the Federal Inspection Framework, but as far as I know, ADEC certainly haven't released anything officially yet to schools. However, there does seem to be the expectation that there will be formal inspections of some kind, some shape or form from January onwards. It may be January or February, but you know, at this stage, we don't know anything definite. If we consider that we're already 2 cycles behind, so we're already 2 trimesters behind actually. So, you know, normally the schools, a couple of the schools I were working with last March would do inspections, and then we had that sudden lockdown. So, you know, they are actually having to catch up now. When they do resume, they're having to catch up with those 2 groups of schools that were, you know, March to June last year and then September to December. So there's a high probability from what people are saying, you know, colleagues in the inspection system, colleagues in regulators, a high probability that it will be a mixture combined model when they resume. You know, many of the schools at the moment are still 80–90% distance, so there's no way they can do a full usual inspection. My idea, which is a guess at this stage, is probably an informed guess, but my idea is that it would be a combination of an online you know, visit where they visit some lessons and they look at you know, the communication and the interaction between teachers and students, and they look at documents online, and possibly a short campus visit. You know, they may do a one-day visit, but it probably would be some kind of hybrid model. If we think back to May or June, there was the distance learning evaluation, which is this screen underneath here, this table underneath with the 3 zones. So many of the schools had that. That was a one-day process back in May and June. I would say it was pretty superficial. The feedback that schools had from it was very, very short. It was just a couple of lines and a table. So, you know, we didn't really get the richness from that we would get even from a short monitoring visit, even from a one-day, you know, the old, what they used to call the monitoring visits previously. So hopefully if they do resume the external scrutiny now in January and February, it'll be more detailed. We'll come on in a minute to some tips, and what I want to try and do today is just share with you some, you know, some experience and some ideas. As Catherine said earlier, suggestions. You know, we're all in the same boat, or the saying is, what is it? We're in different boats but paddling in the same direction, I think. But we're all, you know, trying to do our best in challenging times. So it is tricky. What I would say is prepare for an inspection of some shape or form from January onwards. The distance learning evaluations in May or June, you know, there was scrutiny by the regulators, both to hold schools accountable. There was a bit of quality assurance needed there, but I think they also wanted to have an insight into what was happening. You know, it's a very new system for us all. We've got schools now working online, hybrid. Some schools are doing, some teachers are in the situation where they have to teach a class in front of them, and they have online students as well at the same time, which is challenging. Others have got different teachers doing different things. So, you know, it depends on the school. You may have one school, one class entirely online, and then another class entirely face-to-face, which is easier actually. But, you know, either way, it's difficult. So, okay, so expect a visit of some kind from January onwards. Thanks, Catherine. Could we go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay. So these are general tips really, and this will just be based on working with many schools. The evidence that we have of what's going on is very important. So usually when we're doing some work with a school physically face to face, I would walk around the school with the head and with the principal and the senior leaders, middle leaders, walk around and try and give them a picture of what I'm seeing through the eyes of an inspector. In other words, you know, what am I seeing around the school? What am I not seeing? And what questions is it popping into my head as I walk around? When we're doing this online, it's a little bit difficult, a little bit different, because obviously we don't know which lessons the visitors may pop into, and we don't know when. So as with a physical inspection, the teachers will be preparing very well, and they'll be trying to, you know, to cover everything that is possible to do in that day. But I would say focus on things, you know, whether it's online or in a physical campus-based inspection. I would focus on learning, of course. That's the most important thing that the inspectors would be looking for. Variety of approaches and resources. So there are some tremendous systems in use at the moment. Schools and teachers have really embraced online technology in the last 6 months, wherever they were before. You know, some schools were doing a lot of online learning previously, and some were mostly book-based or, you know, verbal instruction. There are some tremendous systems around. You know, we'll probably share some, but there are a lot of different resources, online resources. One of the big challenges the schools are having at the moment is to get the students to participate. So in other words, when I look at the Zoom screen at the moment now, I see lots of icons, and you know, there's a few photographs. There are a few that mention the phone. So we've got an iPhone or a Moto or whatever it is. And now and again, you see a picture of somebody actually watching and listening to what you're saying. So it's quite a passive sort of environment, really, in terms of teachers and students. The point there about participation and engagement, I think, is critical, because if you're in a classroom, you can see what's happening, you know. If we've got a situation where the students don't have their videos on, many of the students aren't happy to do that or aren't comfortable to do that. What some schools have done is they've asked the students to have the cameras on their work. So the cameras are actually showing the teacher what they're doing in terms of their book or their writing or their art project, for example, which is helpful, because as a teacher, you want to see what's happening, you know. Otherwise, if you've got 20 icons in front of you, you don't know if the child is, you know, the child is present, you know, the child is connected, but you don't know if there's any engagement or participation necessarily. So I would say that's a very important aspect when we're talking about distance learning, is, you know, ensuring that there's participation and engagement. So a lot of schools are using the chat box. They're using things like Padlet or Jamboard to try and, you know, involve the students and make it an interactive process. So the three things that I would look for evidence of would be learning, the variety of approaches, what's happening in the classroom or online. Participation, engagement, which students are involved, what are they doing, how often. And the other one, which is the bedrock, if you like, the foundation of the inspection process, is student progress. So, you know, if you look at the framework and you look at the rubrics, the lesson judgments come down to how much progress is being made. So progress over time and progress in the lesson. Now, obviously, if we're thinking about a distance frame, a distance environment, an online environment, we've got to, as teachers, we've got to be able to show or demonstrate how much progress has been made in that lesson. So some kind of plenary task, exit task, mini assessment at the end would be very useful. We've got some drawings on the screen. This is Catherine being artistic. Let's have a look. We've got a couple of lines here. So the second one is to make sure that the school community, now the teachers, the students, are very clear on the policy and the vision. So when Catherine and Susie later talk about inclusion, you want to make 100% sure during the, day-to-day operation of the school, but certainly during an inspection, that the teachers and the students understand the policies and the vision of the school, and you know it's consistent, because in some cases when you go into a school, first of all, you'll have a discussion with the principal or with the head, or it could be the inclusion lead or whoever. You have a discussion with somebody and they'll give you some facts, and then you walk around and you speak to some teachers and you speak to some students, and you get a blank response. You get the blank face or the, you know, the question mark. Oh, okay. So make sure that the community is aware of the policies and the visions, and that it's consistent, because, you know, if you've got things prepared, policies in place, the inspector or the visitor wants to go in and see that. That wants to be very much, you know, in evident, consistently across the school. And we mean in there, you know, from KG to grade 12, all grades, all subjects. I've been involved with I think it was an accreditation visit once, and the school had quite evidently spent a lot of time putting their vision statement up around the school, and they went and asked some of the teachers and the students.
Sorry.
Thank you. They asked some teachers and students about the vision, and they were able to talk about it, you know, which is useful. Last one there on this slide is to make sure that you show off your areas of strength. So obviously the inspectors can't miss any best practice. The worst thing possible is that there's a fantastic strategy in place in a lesson, or there's, you know, something wonderful that's going on in a particular class, in a particular grade, and it's not seen. So how can we do that? I would say by photographs. You know, if we're using online mechanisms to capture this, many schools now would have like an online directory or folder, if you like. So some of the schools I'm working with have video clips Yeah, photographs. Make sure that the inspectors can't miss anything that you really want them to see. So I got a couple of examples underneath. We've got some the mild, medium, and spicy, the chili challenge there. But the other one, I think the other one is the student competency framework or moral education, perhaps. So the photograph in the middle there, that's actually photographs showing the students demonstrating each of those skills or competencies. So it's tying the theory to the practice, and it's actually showing the students at work, which was, you know, a very, very useful display. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. That was excellent. That was really useful. So make sure that the inspectors don't miss anything that you want them to see. And it's almost about putting it on a plate in front of them, putting it on the wall, putting it on a video, you know, and actually directing the inspectors towards that practice so they don't miss it. Right. Thanks, Catherine. I'll try and speed up a little bit. Okay, the SEF process, school self-evaluation. In best practice, we would have all stakeholders involved. So you would usually see, you know, obviously teachers across the school involved. Usually you'd see some parents, particularly perhaps in standard 2, which is personal development, or standard 5, which is protection, care and guidance. You would certainly see parents involved. You'd want to have parental input into that. And you'd also want to have the governors involved. So I think in the right place at the right time, try and involve all the stakeholders. I don't have students on that list. I should definitely have students on there. You certainly want to see, when you're looking at the self-evaluation, you want to see some statistics from either parental or student or staff surveys, perhaps, you know. The second one is important. Make sure that the judgments are collegial, make sure that the judgments are shared. And when you come to a judgment, try and discuss it and challenge it. So I will always, when I'm working with the school, I will always speak to the, you know, the team and look at what they've said and ask them to prove or ask them to convince me that they are good or they are very good, you know, and try and ask each other as a team, ask each other challenging questions, because you've got to be able to justify your judgment. If you are saying that you're good, you know, you've got to be able to prove it. So you want to go back to the inspection framework and look at the descriptions and then just, you know, cross-check. So between departments, between phases of the school or key stages. Also, when we're looking at sources of evidence, we're looking at, you know, obviously the student work, possibly the learning environment if we're in the school physically. We're speaking to the students, we're speaking to the teachers. So there's, you know, there's dialogue, there are interviews involved. So cross-check the sources of evidence that you're using to help you make your judgments. And last but not least, consistency. Most would be probably the word to focus on in the whole process, because if you want to say that most lessons are good, or most students are making, you know, good progress, or most students are attaining in line with age-related expectations, whatever, most is 75%. So that's going to be most in a class, most in a, you know, in a phase of a school, or most in a subject. So that one is a very important word to bear in mind. Sometimes when I read self-evaluations or I read school improvement plans, the school will talk about all 100%, which is quite tough. You know, to get 100%, to get something happening 100% of the time is difficult. And I would argue perhaps it's a little bit unrealistic. Most is enough. You don't need 100%. You need most. If you can get 80 or 90, brilliant. But focus on most. Photographs there, the one on the bottom right is one of my schools. That's some middle leaders looking at lessons, and they're actually challenging each other with judgments. So they're doing a little bit of role play and peer discussion there about lesson judgments. Okay, Catherine, next slide, please. Okay, you can read that. I'm not going to read all of that to you. This is the big picture. So this is stepping back and looking at the whole process, really, how it fits together. One thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the box on the left, limiting factors. So the limiting factors in the inspection at the moment are, they do include self-evaluation and school improvement planning. So in order for the school to be good or very good, these aspects, should be well addressed. Self-evaluation is the school's opinion. So this, as we said earlier, if you're doing this with all stakeholders and you're challenging each other, you should be very, very confident and very sure that your self-evaluation is accurate. That is the most important piece of advice. I've spoken to principals where we've been looking at a self-evaluation that's way out, that's totally, the rose-colored spectacles are on and they're very, very over-ambitious, and I've got to smile and be very diplomatic and say, are you sure? Are you sure about this? Have you checked this? Because it's not right. It must be accurate. There's no point at all in having a self-evaluation that's way too generous. You've got to strike a balance between doing justice to your school and your team and the hard work that's been going on for the last year or 2 years. That's, you want to recognize that, but you equally need to have the evidence to support the judgments. So please make the self-evaluation process collegial, involving everybody as far as possible, or key people, and also try and make it accurate. When they come in at the bottom, the observation and the evidence, when they come in, whether it's accreditation team, inspection team, what they're doing is they're looking at the school's opinion and they're trying to corroborate or trying to confirm that. So basically they are, judging the leadership of the school on the self-evaluation to a large extent. So if you've got a very accurate self-evaluation, if you know exactly where the school is, you have an accurate school improvement plan, a SIP or an STP. So if the leadership team at all levels, so it's actually principal, heads, middle leaders, all of the leaders, if they have a very clear idea of where the school is and they know where they want to go and how to get there, then that's a very large green tick on the form straight away. Because what that means is that leadership has a capacity to improve. The leadership is effective largely. Then we come on, to teaching, learning, everything else. So that's a kind of just a big picture in terms of what they call triangulation. And what we're looking at there is how the self-evaluation sits alongside the school improvement plan. And then the external view would be trying to sort of look at all of those and weigh up whether they are on track, whether they're accurate, and whether they're realistic as well. So a couple of differences. Obviously, the framework at the moment is every 2 years in Abu Dhabi, every year in Dubai. SPEAR are coming on board soon with their framework, and then the Northern Emirates have all of this joy and excitement to come in the future. The only other thing I'd say about the SIP is make sure that the goals are smart. Some schools, even some fairly reputable, high-performing schools I've worked with, have fairly woolly SIP goals. Try and make sure that they're smart and realistic and accurate and clear. They need to be measurable. Okay. Any questions, obviously, at the end on this? And I'm aware that I'm talking a lot, so let's move on, please, Catherine, to the next slide, if we can. Thanks. So we've just taken this out of the framework. This is a description of outstanding self-evaluation and improvement planning. I haven't highlighted, but I've just identified a few of the keywords. Linked to what I just said, make sure that it is systematic and it's rigorous, systematic monitoring, and it is reliable. So this is outstanding practice. Also at the bottom, it mentions performance management. Schools are trying their best at the moment to have some kind of performance management online with the distance learning. It's very different watching lessons online than in a classroom, and we have to be aware of the challenges that the teachers are facing. Obviously, it isn't easy, but there are systems carrying on. Everything has to continue. So lesson visits, observations, assessment, moderation, all of these things, they need to continue, even if they're adapted for distance or for online practice. Okay, thanks, Catherine. We can jump to the next one. And then I've just picked out one of the areas that I thought was relevant to today's topic, which is catering for the needs of groups or for individual learners. And I'd like you to have a look, please, at the difference between the ratings here of practice, particularly between weak and good, because this is probably one of the, I must have worked with over 100 schools, at least, maybe more, in the last 7 or 8 years in the UAE. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges for a minority of schools. Thankfully, it's only a minority of schools, but catering for the needs of groups. So this is, we could call it differentiated instruction, differentiated practice. But basically, we are saying that even to be good, that teachers must be using strategies that meet the individual needs of students, and they provide appropriate levels of challenge and support. So this is going to link into the presentation Catherine's speaking about later, because we have, in this system, we have the groups of students and we have the individual learners. So obviously, if a child has individual learning needs, they should have an IEP, they should be very well catered for. On the level of groups here, we're talking about, obviously the different learning styles, the boys and the girls in some schools. There are second language learners, and there are, faster learners, gifted and talented students as well. There's nothing worse than sitting in a lesson and seeing a child who's finished and they've got their arms folded and they're sitting waiting. And you'll ask that student what's happening. Oh, I'm waiting for the class. There's no extension activity provided. So I wanted just to mention this as a kind of a focus point, really, from Standard 3, because for a lesson to be good, coming back to what I said earlier, for a lesson to be good in this area, or for a school to be rated as good in this particular element, most lessons, most of the time, should be, ticking this box. So I just wanted to highlight this. If you go over then to outstanding, you'll see different language, talking about the expectations of all students, and you talk about the challenge and the support. So the both ends, the actual, the difference between the challenge and the support is mentioned. So I wanted just to finish on that. That's something that I think links into, to the topic today. And even though we've rattled through that at a little bit of pace, I hope some of that is useful and interesting. And, I thank Catherine and Susie again for the invitation today. I look forward to hearing about the topic in a little bit more detail. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. Everybody, I really have to apologize because I feel like I'm in a spa. Somebody started playing this ambiance music and I can't switch it off. So we're going to be having a little bit of background music for me. If it gets really loud again, I may ask either Susie or Jeff to skip through to the questions section, because it came on literally blasting just a few minutes ago. So I may have to go on mute. If it happens, we can skip to questions. So following on from what Jeff was saying, from working with schools across the Emirates, I've found that a lot of times the inclusion department is very much catered for separately during inspection, and that can't be the case. When we are presenting for our teams, we need to make sure that we're fully integrated with the SLT, that they know exactly what we're doing, exactly what provision we have, and that everybody's telling the same story. So a big part of it is telling a coherent story. Now, the DLE looked at kind of specific areas that were drawn from the inspection framework, but were a little bit more, they weren't quite as specific or in depth. So one of those was student experience, which was probably the biggest area that was highlighted in terms of ensuring their well-being, their protection care, how they were feeling, and as Jeff said, how they were participating. Looking at learning, delivery models, and all of the, Jeff has gone through these, so I'll skip through pretty quickly and look toward inclusion. At all times for inspection prep, guys, we should have the framework in mind. The framework isn't just a tool for kind of appraising us, it's also our support to show us where we need to go and what we need to be doing. Jeff was looking at what constitutes good lessons and good teaching and learning. Equally, we can look at PS5 and see what constitutes good provision in terms of this international benchmarking standard, which the framework really is. And it gives us our guidelines as to what we should be doing. So there are specific areas that are really pertinent, I think, for specific to inclusion. So leadership and governance, as I was saying, we need to have our strategic plan in place. And I'll look at a sample of a strategic plan in just a few minutes. We should be focusing on CPD always for our learning support assistants, our previously called shadow teachers, our support teachers, and ensuring that the qualifications they have are utilized. Very often, guys, we have amazing quality in our support teachers and our classroom assistants. We've got people who are spending a lot of their time cutting and pasting, who have masters in special ed, who have higher diplomas in specific specialities like autism awareness or support for dyslexia. So really looking at the qualifications of people on your team can be a huge, that can be a great resource for you. And make sure that you've got a robust planning, reviewing, appraisal, constant appraisal, always looking for impact. So when you're doing an audit, you should really look at all the actions that you and your team are taking. What is the impact? How is it affecting student outcomes? It's always got to come back. Start with the student, end with the student. In terms of identification, have you edited and amended your tools to be conducive to the online setting or the blended setting? Jeff was mentioning there that some teachers are teaching the kids in front of them, they're teaching kids online, they've got separate sessions where they've got online only, and very often I think individual needs are going unrecognized, particularly if you've got kids who are not coming to school, who are doing only distance learning. And it's hard to recognize needs when you don't see them in front of you, you don't catch those nuances. So having robust checklists and screeners that can be used in the online setting, that's really important as well. Parent partnerships is always a big one. So ensuring that you have some sort of regular communication with your parents, whether that's in the form of a newsletter, bulletins, a sway, coffee mornings or virtual coffee mornings, whatever that is. There are loads of volunteer programs in the UAE. A really good one that I've come across recently and who we had joining us on the forum, I think it was last fortnight, was the Rabia. So that's RAB3I, the Rabia program, and they support students and young adults of determination by matching them with typically functioning people in society to help them integrate into either the workforce or society. So knowing about those kind of volunteer programs and getting involved with the whole community is a great way of engaging parent partnerships. Curricular modification, again, as Jeff said, differentiation, it's a really big player, and modifying the curriculum, so the mainstream curriculum, to ensure that every student's need is met. Personal support, particularly in the online setting, make it really evident how you've adapted, say, Teams or Zoom, Edmodo, Seesaw, how are you utilizing those support to support your SEND students? So an example might be delivering specific programs of support through Zoom. So one of them that a really common program is the Toe by Toe program for dyslexia. That's really easy to deliver through Zoom. Another one might be any of the physical training programs. They are quite easy to deliver through Teams as long as there's not manipulation involved. So you can easily demonstrate them as you see like a lot of those YouTube trainers. It's easy to follow those videos. So we as practitioners can deliver our programs also. And then again, bringing it back to the student, looking at your progress and outcomes. So how are you tracking your online delivery and how are you demonstrating that impact? Do you triangulate that with your main cohort? So are you looking at CAT4 if you do it, GL, MAP scores? Are you connecting that if you're doing bespoke assessments like the Chanel or the Reading Rockets or Mathletics? Are you coordinating all of those to show if a child on your program is making progress, how does that reflect in MAP? How does that reflect in your GLs? Where is the correlation and can you demonstrate it well? And that's where you will really be able to show the impact of the support that you're providing. One of the questions that I was always asked as a SENCO was, what percentage of your students, your tier 3 or wave 3 students, are on track for literacy or for mathematics or in science? And you'd be amazed how difficult it can be to answer that question using school data. It takes a lot of pulling out that data because it's not just your MAP data, for example, for the US schools. You need to coordinate it with your IEP targets and progress against the targets, progress against individual programs of support. So you can extract the data and report on it separately. And as far as DSIB, ADEC, and SPIA are concerned, from what I've been told, yes, you can report separately. You do have to report in the main CEF, the whole cohort, including your tier 3 kids, but you can also report with that data extracted. And that can make a really significant difference to your assessment data for the school. Very often you would see in assessment data that 2 or 3 outliers can completely skew a school's entire results for particular grading. So it's important to be able to do that, to extract them. It's very useful, I've found, to have a checklist for doing an inclusion audit so that you're very clear on what you're looking for. You can clearly track where the school is and what you need to do. And having a really a well-defined checklist that you can present to the SLT can support in getting any additional resources that you may need. And I'll share an example of the checklist that I've developed over the last few years. And this is just a screenshot from one of the first pages of it. Sorry, guys. So you're looking at things like you're appraising your policy, appraising the support, appraising the programs, appraising the impact, and you're checking each area to see, is it in place? Is it embedded? As in, is it well practiced? And as Jeff was saying, if you walk into a classroom and you ask your teacher, have you read the inclusion policy? If they say, oh yeah, well, what do you think are the main points? They should know that. And there are maybe 5 or 6 key policies that they should have very much to the fore. The teaching and learning policy, the assessment policy, the inclusion policy, safeguarding policy. They'd be kind of the ones that come to mind. Susie, can you think of any other policies that you would say would have to be?
The counseling and the anti-bullying.
Yeah.
Also.
Especially online, since we've shifted to online. What about you, Jeff? What would you think for really key policies that the staff should know?
the moment, I would think well-being is very important. And as you said, online safety, cyberbullying, these kinds of areas, because I was chatting actually with my daughter yesterday, who is in, what's she in, grade 9, grade 10, and she was saying how different it is now, because they've got a group of students at home and a group of students, you know, on the computers, and a group of students in class. And she said, it's totally different, completely different. So I think, you know, the bullying policy, anti-bullying and well-being, all of those would be probably even more important than usual.
Yeah, and for a Senko particularly, I think it's useful to have a staff sign-off sheet for the policy, because sometimes you'll get some members of staff that will say, nobody ever gave it to me, which happens. It gets lost in emails, people forget, people are overwhelmed with data and paperwork. So having a staff sign-off sheet is very, it's useful to ensure that there's accountability.
Also, Catherine, for the, how do you call that, the educational report that you get back, the educational psychologist report, I also made sure that my staff, they would sign off so that every teacher has read it. So there is no more confusion about our corridor talks. It's that they have taken the report, they've read it through, made some accommodation or some notes for them to prepare the lesson and make sure that it is tailored to the child.
And it kind of makes teachers particularly that bit more conscious of, like, it makes them realize there's no getting away with not reading those kind of reports or not reading the policy, because they're signing off that they have done it. So it just supports you in when you're presenting for SLT or for inspection, or just in general, to make sure that everyone is aware. So I would always use a pretty detailed checklist like this to keep myself on track, and to make sure that you don't forget anything, because as a Senko, there's a million things to do. And unless you're very organized in terms of keeping track of what's needed to be presented and what's needed to be tracked, it's very easy to forget something, and to forget something important, because pretty much everything is quite important. Moving on to creating a strategic inclusive education plan, the STIP. So once you've done your audit and you've spoken to your stakeholders, as Jeff was saying, you've got to involve everybody, get everybody's view as to what they think is working and what they think isn't. Because what we might think is very effective, a class teacher may not, or a senior leadership may not realize the value of something that's going on. So it's important to get everybody's perspectives. Define your end goals. So your vision and your mission should inform what the end goals are for every one of your action points on the strategic plan. Consult the framework. Make sure that you keep that in mind. List down the steps that you need to follow. Prioritize your tasks, and set deadlines. It's like having a time frame as part of the smart target generation. Your time frame is really important. And if you set up your strategic plan well from the get-go, it helps you keep on track and helps you really keep in mind what needs to be done at what times. Identifying your resources, again, go back, consult the framework, start with the student, end with the student, and continuously monitoring. A strategic plan should not be a fixed document that gets done at the start of the year. It should quite literally be like an IEP for you and your department. It should be on the wall, on your desk, always at the forefront. What's changing, what needs to be added, and equally celebrating every time that you achieve one of your targets on the plan. So when I'm compiling a strategic plan, I always kind of look first at the very big picture, like Jeff was saying as well. What are the global strategic objectives that you're trying to achieve? Like, what is your why? So looking at things like supporting students as they exit education to enter society, that's going to be your very big why. And by having that in mind, that helps you to step back and back and back into what you're doing on an individual basis in the school. Trying to keep in mind as well how your plan will align with the national agenda. we're in a country that values that agenda very heavily, and we're reviewing it again next year with further updates in 2023. Now, in January of this year, the government issued a countrywide update to supporting and empowering, a policy for supporting and empowering people of determination. So inclusion is very much to the front and center of the national agenda. And you can be sure if it's in the front and center for national agenda, it will be reflected in the regulatory monitoring. So the visits we get for DLE or for inspection, they're going to be prioritizing that as well. So when I'm compiling a plan, I would always look at kind of a set areas, and I've given an example here. So your focus, what is the general purpose of whatever your action point is? The purpose, that's tying into your vision and your mission. What's the reason for having it? And there's a technique used, the 5 whys. So if you have any, like an action point, like say you want to review your IEPs, you have to ask why 5 times. So I want to review my IEPs, why? To make them better, why? To ensure that they're more effective, why? To support teachers in class, why? To support students in class, why? So that perhaps students can gain meaningful employment when they leave school. So you need to really drill down into each step, asking the 5 whys to make sure that it's purposeful. Then looking at the mechanics of it. How are you going to do it? What does it look like in practice? And what do you need to have in place in order to achieve it? Always being mindful of your time frame and cost. Remember your SMART targets: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. What is the time frame? So are you looking at a short term, maybe 3 to 4 months target, or a more long-term 1 to 2 years? Who is going to lead on it? And your success criteria, having very clearly defined like a trajectory is what it will look like when you achieve it. And then I would RAG rate that throughout the year. So you're continuously updating, and RAG means red, amber, green. So red means it's not been achieved yet. Amber if you're working toward that action point, and green when you've achieved it and you can tick it off. As a leader then, if you're privy to your budget, which not all Senkos are, and that can be quite restrictive if you're not privy to your budget. If at all possible, I would ask your SLT to allow you some insight into what your budgeting restrictions are. I would always add to the internal strategic plan. This is to be shared within your team and the SLT. What the cost will be, who is it for, and that helps you crystallize it as well, and the proposed impact, and what date you want to achieve it. So that's just a little additional insight for making sure that your action plan is going to be within your budget and effective. And you can see up on top here, I've got the follow the golden thread through the framework. And Ofsted over the last year or two have really been promoting this idea of a golden thread through the framework. And that is kind of seeing the connectivity between the different performance standards and how they all marry together. So if you're looking at improvements in assessment, how does PS1 link in with PS3 if you're making curricular modifications? How does that link in with teaching and learning? How does that link in with PS5 and inclusion? So it's really knowing the kind of the pathway through the framework and how each part marries together. Looking at your input, your process, and your output, always appraising your impact. And I'll share this example as well, a blank template for anyone who needs it. So all of those examples will be in the Dropbox, which can be found on the email link. So if you want to be added to the email group, just pop me an email. My email is on the group chat. And now we can go last 10 minutes. If anyone has any questions, I know we do that.
There was a question regarding how do we present the progress of pupil of determination?
the age-old question. Shall I take that, Jeff, or would you like to?
No, it's fine.
I'll go ahead. Okay, so progress is very much dependent on the school's general data analysis. If you are tracking according to, like, some of the schools are using things like ISAMS, SIMS, Classroom Monitor, and they can help collate all your data. So if you've got data coming in from MAP, or you've got data coming in from your GLs, your Cat 4, it's important to always triangulate those. Now, how you present that is up to you. Usually, if you are an Excel buff, you can get the systems to speak to each other, to import the data direct from one system to the other. So you're not literally filling in data by hand. Now, if you're using individual programs of support, I would design bespoke tracking sheets to monitor those. Now, the ones that I use are like literally tick boxes. In order for them to be utilized and to be effective, it has to be really easy and not burdensome. SEND teachers and classroom teachers are already overloaded with data analysis, so we don't want to give them any much more to do. So keeping it as simple and easy to use as possible is really key, because otherwise they just won't use them. So yeah, I triangulate them probably on something like Excel, or there's a new tool on Microsoft, the name is escaping me. It's a data analysis that can coordinate or correlate all of your data. Now, I'm still trying to get used to it, but it looks like it would do everything, including your household washing for you, if you know how to use it properly. So if it's worthwhile doing mini courses on Excel or those data tools, because they make your life really a lot easier once you get used to them.
There is another question also. Should we have an action plan and strategic educational plan? Both?
It's one and the same. It's the same thing. So this Strategic Inclusive Education Plan is the title given by DSIB, and I've stuck with that because I started off as Senko in Dubai, so it's stuck with me. But that is your action plan for inclusion. That's it.
Another one. How can you check and help Wave 2 students to progress?
Can you say that again, Susie?
How do you check and help Wave 2 students to progress?
It depends on how you're delivering support. And Susie, you can talk to this as well. It depends on the school's individual method of support. If you're doing withdrawals for
one-to-one, one-to-one group support, or exactly.
Yeah, and again, if you've got really good, easy to use, efficient tracking sheets, you can track the progress on there, and you can see really clearly those students who aren't making progress and regroup and reappraise what's not working and what is working.
So the program that you were looking, was it Inside Futures on Teams?
No, it's I think it's something. It's not iCademy. It's I can't remember. It's not terribly new. I think it's new in the last 2 years or so, but it's on Office 365. It's one of the options, but it's mostly purchased, so it does need a subscription, but it looks like it does everything for you. So I wonder, is that all of our questions?
There is one more. There is asking those students who are not pulled out of class and we can't provide them one-to-one support. What do you do?
That's where your differentiation, curriculum modifications come in. It's really useful to have kind of a set of standardized curriculum modifications that are fitting for your curriculum, whether it's the Indian, the UK, US, or any other curricula that are being practiced, and having modifications that the teachers can use on a daily basis. Literally, like I would develop a sheet that they can put on the wall and utilize those, and that can inform the differentiation. So if you've got, for example, a kid with dyslexia, like the differentiation for that child will be pretty similar across different subjects, somewhat similar across different curricula as well. Think tools to use, like using an overlay, changing the font, using highlighter on alternate lines. That's differentiation that can have a huge impact on kids in class. So equipping the teachers with the tools they need to support the kids within the classroom setting is probably the more effective tool that you'll have for the kids who don't have one-to-one or withdrawal sessions.
What was again that group that we had, RAE3?
Rabi, I'll put it on the group chat. Yeah. It's a funny one. It's pronounced Rabia. Any Arabic speakers who are here, it means friendship apparently. If
yes.
I'm not mistaken, Rabia.
Yeah, that's it.
AB3I. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, yeah, that's the community program, and that we shared that last week, the links to it last week on our forum email, if anyone is looking for it. Oh, Shirley, you weren't on the forum email last week. You've just joined us. Welcome. I can send that to you, Shirley. I'll send it. Yeah. Okay, guys, if anyone has, what is the tool you mentioned to help with collating data? Not the one on 365. Which tool now? Excel, maybe? There was Excel. Let me have a look, guys. I'll see if I can find it. If I can find, I'll find it and I'll share it on the group email. I'll put it when I send the email tomorrow. I'll put that on, and I'll add the link to Rabia as well. If you're not on the email list, guys, you can join by popping me an email at Kate's Counselling, and that's in the chat. I'll put it on here now.
I have, yeah. Several times. There you go.
Yeah. We're the inclusion learners here as well. Okay, guys, that's awesome. Thank you all so much for coming. We had a really good turnout today, more than 100 people. If anybody has something they want to share, or if they want to lead a session, please do email us. We're always keen to have more voices. It seems to be the same group of people every week, but we really want to hear everyone else's experience and get people involved. And thank you so much, Jeff, for your time. It's been really informative.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's been great. I wonder if we have any Welsh speakers in the group. They can.
Well, behind me is Spanish, actually. The picture behind me is Spanish, so I'm not sure if anybody spotted it or not.
Okay.
Catherine,
I think I was Welsh, unfortunately. I'm not a Welsh speaker. I'd like to be, but I'm not. Sign language, yeah, there we are.
I was also going to say in the group, if they are, if any of their well-being team have any topic that they would like us to talk about, please don't hesitate to email us so that we can, because we are rich in so many PowerPoints, but it's just to give what's relevant to you at the time that you need. So please don't hesitate to share your queries or anything that you'd like to be get some extra information. Just don't hesitate to share through email. Thanks.
Yeah. Our next session will be in 2 weeks' time, and that session will focus on well-being. So if anyone has any ideas, guys, please do come join us and present, because everyone is learning from each other.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, by the way, if anybody has any connections in inclusion or well-being in Alain, I'm based down here now, so I'm going to try to engage this community a bit more. From what I know, there's not a huge amount going on in the city to support inclusion leaders. So if anyone knows people in schools down here, in centres, please let me know who they are and connect them with me, and we can invite them to come and participate in the forum too. The more, the merrier. All right. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for your time and for your support. And we will be in touch tomorrow with the group email. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll be back with you for a session focusing on well-being. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Susie. Thanks, everyone, for coming. And
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And it will be very good if you can arrange this session once again, ma'am.
The session is recorded, so I'll share the link to the recording in the group email.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank